Well, good. Well, thank you very much, Lou. Appreciate the introduction. I am Scott Johnson, and I am an ACI. I've worked with the certification committee of ASHI, which governs the ACI. I've worked with that for 10 years now, either officially or in the background, helping to lead that. It was a great organization that I got into, and that's how I met one of your members, Jim Funkhauser, again about 10 years ago. He and J.D. Gruhl came up to me and said, whatever you need, we're here. Whatever you want to learn, we'll teach you. And they were both good to their words. And it was sad when we lost J.D., but I've been proud to call Jim a friend for 10 years. So we're going to be getting going right now in cladding. It's no skin off my back. And I got a precursor. A lot of my pictures I've taken off of Google. So if you've posted pictures and one of yours is on here, let me know. With your permission, I'd love to put your name on it and give you recognition every time I present this around the nation. I've passed out some business cards. If you don't have one, I'll be glad to get it to you in between classes. You'll see, I work for BPG Inspections. They're the big dogs across the nation. You either love them or you hate them. I happen to love them, but I don't get offended if somebody hates them. It's a big corporate company, but it's done very well to keep me in good benefits for the time I've been with them. So let's get rolling here. This is the building code. And I want to preface, and the reason my first slide goes into that is we are not code inspectors. And I don't want to teach you to be a code inspector unless you want to go through that class. I would love for you and the people out in the virtual world to understand that the building code is the foundation for everything we do in the inspection trade. If you hear a builder say, I built the builder code, the building code, we'll say, God bless your sweetheart. In Georgia, that means a certain thing when you say that. But what it means is that they are building to Yugo standards, to Gremlin standards, or to Pacer standards. They're not building to Maserati standards. The building code is the minimum possible standard to construct a house and to do the electrical and to do the plumbing. However, it is a great foundation for what we do. So I have those building codes in here. When I do, now in Georgia, if we're going to do a new construction house, we have to be code certified. We have to be ASHI certified. And we also have to have all these insurances. There's a lot of things that the builders, the owners of the property, make us do to get on to their dirt. So this is just kind of a reference. And what the cladding does, what the siding does, is it gives a skin. I'm a veteran. I was in the Army. I was a paramedic in the Army, went to Somalia. And when I was in training in Fort Sam Houston, my drill sergeant, the person teaching me preparing for the paramedic exam, taught me that what's outside, we keep outside, and what's inside, we want inside. So if we got my inside coming out of my skin, that's a problem. Or if we have the dirt from the outside going inside my skin, that's a problem. Again, cladding, siding, paint is the skin of the house. So if we have stuff coming in that's not supposed to be coming in, that's not good for the house, that's not good for the people inside the house. And if we have the stuff inside going out, that's not going to be good either, that's not efficient. So what 703.1 talks about in the building code is keeping it weather resistant or a weather barrier. So protect the skin. Water resistance. I'm not used to this, so it's going to take me a little bit. Am I? Okay, thank you. So I need to stay here. In my company that I work for, we use HomeGauge. There's many great softwares out there, but we've built in a lot of disclaimers and a lot of informational things that go into our report. And so we talk a little bit about what cladding is, about what siding is. We talk about the different types a little bit in this general comment, and then we'll go into more and follow the ASHI standards of practice of saying what kind of cladding it is. Is it EIFS? Is it hardboard? Is it cement fiber hardboard, or the MDF, medium density fiberboard, masonite type stuff? or is it OSB, Oriented Strand Board, Louisiana Pacific brick, stone, whatever it happens to be? We'll go into that as well. Do y'all have much Louisiana Pacific, or did you have much Louisiana Pacific lap siding up here in the 90s? Probably not. I don't see recognition. It was an OSB-based siding with a real pretty face on it, and you keep it painted, it's fine. However, the very bottom edge in Louisiana Pacific got fined billions of dollars in a class action suit, billions with a B, and because that bottom edge, the raindrops would hold on that bottom edge of the lap siding and eventually soak up inside. And it's just OSB, it's just Oriented Strand. If that stuff does get wet, yes, sir.
Yeah, we had it here.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The easiest way to tell the Louisiana Pacific is about every 6th or 7th board being laid on the house would have these 2 3/8 inch knots that had a little upside down inverted L in them. It looked just like a knot, and the knots ran about every 5 to 6 feet along that board, whether it's a 10 or a 12-foot or 16-foot board, but it'd run about every 5 to 6 foot, and you could tell those knots. They were really obvious. I think I'll have a picture later on as we go in. But it was really popular, kind of like polybutylene water supply pipe. That stuff had it was sold as the best thing ever to come out. I was building houses. I built a house for myself in 1986, the last house I built for myself, and I used that stuff everywhere. And then a few years later, I tore it out everywhere and put in copper or PVC, or CPVC, sorry. All right, now done with the lecture slides. So 96 is when the lawsuit happened. This is $65 million, and that was the original amount that the court settled for. However, Louisiana Pacific produces a ton of OSB plywood and a ton of different products, and it just paid for them to throw more and more and more money, probably until the early 2000s, to help keep people at bay. So here it is. That knot I was talking about, let's see if I can make this work. It's right here. It's right there. It's that knot that we're looking at right there. That's that 2 3/8 inch knot. And if you look at the slide up into the right there, that's what would happen to it. I have literally seen LP siding, comes from the factory at 7/16 of an inch thick. I've seen that stuff at over an inch thick. So it grew over a ½ inch. And that's just the swelling, the water getting in it, and then it just falls apart. All of our little bugs will get in there. Another good siding to talk about, that's the bottom edge of the LP right there. And you can see that that bottom edge, if you look along there, you can see how it's delaminating, and that's coming apart. So that was one of the things that was so prevalent in Georgia that I can still pull up to a house and say that's LP siding without even getting out of my truck. Masonite is that's another name brand, just like LP is, just like Kleenex is, just like Skill Saw. I own 7 Skill Saws, and none of them are made by the company Skill. I have Nikitas and DeWalt's and Milwaukee's. But this is Masonite siding. What Masonite siding is MDF wood plank, which is not much more than cardboard. It's wood fibers, waxes, glues, and resins. It's a very durable cardboard. We've seen it in our kitchen cabinets and our bathroom cabinets for decades. But using it as a siding, it had a lot better covering on the bottom. And what happened with Masonite is if we drove nails in, exposed nails, they were visible, or the butt joints, water would eventually get in there. Even if we caulked it really well at construction, water would eventually get into the voids and the fissures and just swell this stuff right on up, just like cardboard does not do well in water. This doesn't either. Probably not very fair to call it cardboard, but it's not far, is it? The different types of Masonite, they still have those 800 numbers. I've not called them in probably 5 years. Last time I did, just after one of these classes, I gave that call, and they were still functional. I could still reach a human. It took a little bit to get through their menu, just like any big company, but I was able to reach a human and be able to talk with them and see where we were. There is no money left at any of these. LP, Masonite, Georgia Pacific, any of the manufacturers. I think as far as claddings go, the only place that there is a little bit of money left, and you really have to use the force to get through it, is Drive It, Eve's lawsuit. And we'll talk more about that as well. So here are the different looks. That left side is the back of Masonite right there. And that's just kind of an easy way to tell. And to figure out which product that was, back then even Simplank, who makes the cement fiber stuff now, they had some MDF and some OSB stuff out. You can look over to the right side and see the back of the OSB there. I'm really starting to like this. And then, of course, the LP knot right in the dead center. If we see any of these man-made sidings, they probably have an issue with them, and the main thing is keep them painted. So I actually did a house about, I think it was in September, and it had LP siding on it, and that stuff looked like the bottom of John Hardy. It looked beautiful, because the people who bought that house read the manufacturer's installation instructions. You know, when we paint a house, first of all, the painters a lot of times will put a little water in that paint to make it go on easier and smoother. That's a no-no. That's directly against what the engineers and the chemists said that you can do with that paint. But they also put one coat on. It might be 30-year paint, but that's not good for 30 years with one coat, the first coat. All the manufacturers say they want the good 25 to 35-year paint with being repainted every 5 to 7 years. Especially, I don't think that's me. Is that me? Just squelching? Okay. But they want it every 5 to 7 years. I paint my house about every 3 to 5 years because I live in Georgia. Welcome to the state of Georgia. Our state bird is the mosquito, and our state flower is the mold. And so the mold and mildew that will grow on every surface in Georgia will just eat the paint. So let's take care of it. Then you get the really hot sun. So it'll rain for 3 days and then bake for a week. And that's very common there. Y'all have a little bit cooler climate, I believe, here. I have family that lives in Roanoke, and we visit them every once in a while. So I think I was about 3 hours south of here when I was driving. And I drove from Atlanta here yesterday. Another picture of the MDF, the medium density fiberboard. Works well. It is beautiful to cut. When my wife and I got married, we made some cabinets in the garage to keep my tools stored and out of the way, and that lasted about 2 minutes, but we still made some out of MDF, and they're still good. So we got married in 2001, just as damp and humid as a garage can be in Georgia. Those have held up pretty well inside the garage. Part of a piece of the OSB plywood, so that you can see the oriented strand boards. There's usually 7 to 13 orients or layers to a piece of OSB, and they switch just like a piece of plywood does in their direction. So the orients will be going one way and then go perpendicular and then all the way up, and that gives them some really, really good strength. Back in the 80s, when we first started seeing OSB around, they used an adhesive or a glue that was not very marine friendly. And then we're going to put this stuff on as sheathing for floors, for roofs, and for outsides of houses to help give some structure. And it got wet and would just come apart. So I think even the Louisiana Pacific now, if it was used today with where we're using a lot more marine friendly or water friendly adhesives in the OSB. Yeah, somebody's on somewhere here. But it will hold up a lot better to any moisture and humidities. Just another good set of pictures. Is this pretty clear to y'all, or would dimming the lights, or I don't want to turn the lights off, everybody will start snoring then. Okay, just keep rocking. So they're plywood sidings. T111 is the name brand again, but we talk about the T111 a lot. It comes in widths of 4-inch on center, 6, 8, 10, and 12. It looks like a batten type siding, so it's a vertical siding. Ooh, nice. That should give you a lot better visibility of that too. I can't see what y'all see in virtual land, so let Hollis enter in something in the notes if not. So here's some of the T111, and that's what happens with it. One way of doing is they'll take and just lap the upper board, just like shingles, the upper board over the bottom, and you can get some water being wicked up into the cladding that way. The way the manufacturer says is to put a Z piece of flashing along this joint through here. And what happens is if we use an aluminum or PVC Z-trap or Z-track, it's going to hold up for longer time. If we use the wooden one, it's going to deteriorate just as fast as anything else if it gets wet. If water's getting past that paint skin, it's going to deteriorate as well. And that picture right there was my mother-in-law's house. First, when my wife and I were dating, we pulled up and I saw that and said, well, it's good to meet you. I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'll be back in a few minutes. And I came back and started fixing her siding because that wooden drip edge had rotted out. Paint. That is so important to anything that's of wood or anything that can deteriorate. If we don't keep it painted, we're going to start seeing some different issues along the bottom edges. Paint and caulk. Never caulk the bottom edge. We know that. That's construction 101. But the vertical edges, the top edges, those are all good to caulk. And try to keep that water out. Water is the single greatest destructive force on this planet. It is. Think about what we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombs, those were pretty destructive, right? Look at the Grand Canyon. That's just a creek. Okay, it's rivers, but that's just water that did the Grand Canyon. Look at some of these mountains around here. Water has eroded away down to the stone base. That's pretty incredible stuff. So if we can control the water, we can control the damage. I'm going to use a 4-letter word. I'm going to use the word mold. That is a 4-letter word, isn't it? But mold needs the same 3 basic building blocks of life that you and I need. Air, yep, I got some air, I can breathe. Mold needs the same thing to live. Food, maybe a little too much last night. But food to mold is going to be organic matter. Wood, paper, cotton, we don't wear much cotton anymore, and wool. So organic material, they have to have food. That's their favorite foods. And then water. I use a lab when I do indoor air quality. I use EMSL. Everybody, I drive a Ford. Who cares? Bill Ford. He's the only one who cares. Name brands really don't impress me, but we happen to use this one company. And the micrologist there, I go to the lab to deliver my samples because I have 20 minutes from my house. And the micrologist and I will sit down, have a glass of water or a cup of coffee and talk every once in a while. And he tells me that in basements, daylight basements or dugout basements, he wants to see the dehumidifier set at 45% relative humidity. He said at 50 and above is where most of the more common molds will grow. And 40 and below, there's another subsection, but right at 45 is the least likely. So he wants our basements at 45. I don't know what that is here for y'all. Talk to your labs here. And if you call a lab, they're happy to talk. They love to impart their vast and wonderful knowledge. I don't understand half the words Dr. Att uses when he tells me what he's talking about, but I can pick up things like 45%. Hollis, I've lost the thing on this. I don't know if it keeps zooming in and out on me. But so heat and cold, especially with vinyl. Look at that. Does anybody know what probably caused that? Possibly just a fire outside, possibly a grill. How about the windows next door? Have y'all seen that phenomenon? Not that bad. That's pretty rough right there. I took that one from Google. So if you took that picture, man, I really would love to get some background information on that one. But look at how melted that is. That's a lot of heat. But those low E windows, when the sun comes in mostly from the east in the mornings and reflects off of that back into the house, 10 feet away, that's a lot of heat being focused right there. It happened to, not to this extent, but it happened to my, thank you, that's wonderful. It happened to my father-in-law on his house, and father-in-law and stepmother-in-law in Charlotte. He called me up, and he just bought the house. First year, calls me up, Scott, the siding's melting. How is that possible? So he took pictures, and that's when I learned about the low E windows reflection there. That's just not what I expected. And here's a better picture of what we see from well, that's actually just installation in it. So what happens when we see the buckling? I mean, vinyl siding and aluminum siding should be the easiest thing in the world to install, shouldn't it? You don't even have to drive the nails hard. You're not supposed to drive the nails hard. That vinyl is supposed to be able to move a ½ inch either way, or a total of an inch, for expansion and contraction. If it's not, it's really neighbor across the street about, I think about 98 is when he built his house. He put vinyl on it, and they put it too tight. And in the fall and in the spring, at about 7 o'clock in the morning, right as the sun started coming, it sounded like popcorn out there. The vinyl, because it was so tight, it was going pop, 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 pop all the way around the house. So much so that it would wake his wife up. He was when he was in the military, he was a command sergeant major of Strategic Air Command. So the dude got up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and in his 80s would go running. But his wife slept in, so it'd wake her up in the mornings. Let's see that picture. So we do see some of the melting here, and that's probably off of that window. Yes, sir. And if you could use the microphone or...
You hear me?
Yes, sir.
How are they going to stop the melting from the windows?
They either have to put another film on, great question, in case you didn't hear, how do we stop the melting from the windows, is either put an additional film that's not as reflective on the windows, kind of like putting tinting your car windows. They'd have to go through and do something like that, or change the siding. I think they've come out with some vinyl that can take more heat, but it's still not designed to take like a magnifier glass worth of intensity, and that's about what the low E does. If you look at a low E window, they're a little concave, and that at a certain point of the sun rising just is a huge focus point.
So I heard where neighbors had a conflict where there was the windows across from the neighbors that was reflecting to their house. So he knocked on his neighbor's door and says, "Hey, we need to put you this reflective film on your on your windows." The guy refused to do it, so he went back over to his house and he put mirrors on his house.
Nice. Pretty easy to tell where that focus was hitting, because it'll just melt certain areas.
Do screens help at all with that, Scott?
I would imagine it does, but most, I didn't see who asked that, but that was a great question. Oh, right here. Thanks, Liv. Do screens help with that reflectiveness? Probably. I really don't know. I've not studied the science of that very much. I've studied the phenomenon. On my father-in-law's house, they replaced his vinyl siding with a denser siding, and that's been, I think they've been in that house 10 years, so that's been at least 9 years of the time. So any of it, making advances toward correction is all we can ever do, right? As the science gets better, they will know. A lot of the higher end sidings will, or the vinyl claddings will tell that it's solar safe. I'm about to replace the deck on my house. It's a 18 by 22 deck. It's going to cost me $52,000 because I'm putting the highest end of the Trex type material. I don't remember the name brand that they're putting on, but there's different levels in that. I got little terrier dogs that their claws, as they go spinning around the decks, just tear it up. So this stuff is supposed to be dog claw friendly. So I'm going to spend an extra $10,000 just for my little mutts. Excessive noise associated with the vinyl, and a lot of that's the popping. If vinyl is installed per manufacturer's installation instructions, and you're not buying the lowest grade stuff, it has an insulation foam board that's supposed to be installed with it. It's going to give some more, very little R value, maybe an R4 added R value, but it's going to give some noise barrier. But what we're talking about here most likely is that popping that happens when the siding's too tight. So anytime I walk into a house that has vinyl siding, I'll grab it and move it. And it should be able to move any time of the day. Maybe not as much as when the sun's right on it or when it's totally in the shade, but you should be able to move vinyl siding just a little bit, ½ inch or so. There's the focal points of the windows next door going right back on that house.
Scott Johnson.
Okay, yep, I hear myself. So we're back on. Awesome, thank you. Again, that straightened out, Hollis. So again, talking about the aluminum siding. The biggest concern with aluminum siding is, well, the expansion contraction, just like vinyl. But if you have an aluminum siding house, do y'all see that very often up here? It was real popular in the 70s back home where I am. Is be careful if they have a lot of lights coming out, like at the eaves or places, because if that aluminum is abraded through the sheathing of the electrical cables, it can light you up. I felt a little buzz on one, and I was like, whoa, what's that? The lady had me come out to inspect just what's going on with her electrical system, because every time the phone rang, her dog howled. So the dog's chain was put onto the grounding electrode, the grounding rod. So something about when the phone rang and the electricity that was already coming in from whatever happened in the aluminum siding, the dog was getting shocked and he would just howl. It was terrible, but also a great story for about 20 years now. Claddings can, and believe it or not, this is aluminum. Isn't that beautiful? Everything has come so far in the technologies and then in the manners of, it's not just there I am pointing again, Hollis. It's not just the lap siding looking of vinyl or aluminum, or that's actually, that's aluminum that's was installed too tight and has popped. But then you get into stuff like that. When you touch that, I expected to find wood. And as I got up close, I'm like, that's a weird shine on it. So kept going and then started tapping it. It sounded like I was tapping a beer can. I mean, a Coke can. Sorry about that. Getting into the masonry stucco, the parging around the bottom of the siding. Masonry stucco, as long as it's attached to the foundation, is about the only cladding that we're allowed to put into dirt, depending on what your Department of Agriculture or your termite inspectors will say. Supposed to have 6 inches of clearance from the bottom of almost every cladding, 4 inches for most claddings over a slab, like over a patio going out back or over a wooden deck. But that 6 inches is really important, not just to give us that clearance of if debris builds up, we don't want water wicking up into the framing of the house. Yes, that's one big reason. That's a whole lot of debris. 6 inches of debris is a whole lot of debris. Main thing, we want to see those subterranean termite tunnels going up the foundation to get into the house. I don't know about you, but in Georgia where I live, 7 to 13 termite colonies per acre, with millions upon millions upon millions of termites in each colony. And their sole purpose in life is to eat dead wood. And that's what we build our houses out of. Of course, they're going to find our house to be a smorgasbord, right? It's going to be an all-you-can-eat buffet. So when they find it, they go and tell all of their friends, and then they tell 2 friends, and we've got a Revlon commercial going on where you get all these pictures of growth there. So we want to be able to see what's happening. What is the standard here for, do y'all do termite inspections, or do you bring in a company? Okay, you did. Department of Agriculture, if you're called a home inspector in Atlanta, you cannot do termite inspections, period. End of discussion. You say termites, you might get sued by the government. I mean, they're tough. So for you, doing those, that's wonderful. You'll be able to go in. We know what we're looking at. We all do. It's just, who gets paid for it.
Let's be clear about that. In Virginia and Maryland, it is illegal for you as a home inspector to identify a wood-destroying organism. You must be licensed by the Department of Agriculture in Virginia. I don't remember who does it in Maryland, but you cannot identify a wood-destroying organism without proper licensing. So to call it a wood-destroying organism is okay. To call it an insect is okay. Okay, but to say it's a termite, there's a fine. You can get fined if you get caught. Now I don't know how you'd get caught, but that's the reality.
Carpenter bee? Carpenter bee?
Cannot say carpenter bee. Cannot say termite. Cannot say. I guess you can say beetle, but you can't say specific type of beetle.
Amazing stuff. We're going to move a little bit more into the masonry stucco. Very rarely is masonry stucco just parging, and that's a cement-based plaster that's put onto a masonry foundation or onto a substrate that's meant to have that has the structural ability to hold that. So parging is one way, but when we get into the whole houses, masonry stucco has to be installed in certain manners. And the way it is you have the framing of the house, sheathing. Now back in the 90s, they allowed the internal sheathing to be the blue foam board or the foam boards or even gypsum. Once all of the synthetic stucco scare in the late 90s happened, they got a lot more better. That's a product of where I'm from. But they got a lot better in their standards for proper installation. They won't plywood or OSB sheathing everywhere under that if it's going to be on the framed house. But you go from that sheathing to a, well, that's actually synthetic. That's eaves right there, because that has the closed cell polystyrene, the styrofoam under it. For masonry stucco, you go from the sheathing to a hardware cloth, a metal cloth, to it. They prefer 3 coats, a scratch coat, a brown coat, and a finish coat. That scratch coat gives a bind between the wire mesh, and then for the brown coat to go on. The only reason it's called a brown coat is they use cheaper river sand for that, which is usually muddy. And then they'll have the finish coat, which is usually a more refined, bleached, cleaned out sand that will give you a smoother, more durable skin on the very, very outside. Let's see if this is the right one. Yeah, there it is. So coming in, well, we still have the same picture with the eaves, but putting onto masonry, like you see there, in the bottom picture is a great way to do it. But if it's onto a sheathing or a framed section, you need to definitely have that hardware cloth going on. I stopped at a Bojangles on my way up yesterday, and they had eaves, synthetic stucco, exterior insulating finishing system, siding on there, and it had a crack at the top of the wall that was about 1 inch wide and went down to about a foot off of the sidewalk, and it was sealed. So that was actively rotating. I thought about putting it in here, but I needed to get these to Hollis quickly last night. So what happens with the stuccos? And we're going to go a little bit into the synthetic here. Let me take you back to that picture and talk about the synthetic right there. So I see a bunch of coffee cups here, and if you're at home, you're probably using a mug, but if you've ever used a styrofoam coffee cup for your coffee or hot chocolate or whatever hot drink or cold drink that is, Chick-fil-A they use styrofoam cups everywhere. Did that scalding a really cold beverage inside, did you feel it outside that cup? Not very much. And that's a 1/16 of an inch of closed-cell polystyrene. On a synthetic stucco or an eaves house, that's an inch of closed-cell polystyrene. What an insulator that is. Now, did your coffee leak out of that coffee cup? No. Well, it's not going to leak out of a synthetic stucco house either, unless it has a trail. So again, keep what's outside the skin outside and what's inside the skin inside. Synthetic stucco, that's huge, because once water gets in at a penetration somewhere high, or missing kick-out flashing, something like that, it's not getting out very easily at the bottom, especially if they have a good seal down there. It's supposed to have a screed that allows that water to drain out. But again, if that's installed 5:30 on a Friday afternoon, it's Miller time, they're ready to go, and you're not getting that screed installed. You're getting, just slapped right back to the foundation, and you got a bucket or a swimming pool. So we want to keep that water controlled and that water out. This is what happens when we don't do that. Look at the damage all up and through here. That is from where water was not controlled, got inside, wicked up. I doubt water was getting in right under the eaves, but it might have. We don't know what condition that roof was. How about cantilevers? Areas like this over here. That cantilever sticking out is a bowl to hold water. So if water gets in around those windows, if those are well caulked, or if there's a light fixture coming through, we can't attach decks to cantilevers anymore. I don't think it was ever allowed, but it's now states that you cannot attach a deck or a structural floor to a cantilever because that's exceeding the cantilever at that time. The simple little pretty trims that we see right here, that's usually right at an expansion joint. Looks like the expansion joint's about center there. But that's another place that's going to tempt water to hold, to pond. Excuse me. And then moving over to the last picture there, we're looking at the some blistering. Rhino Shield, just like the Rhino bed liner in my truck, came out with some incredible products that are very durable, but you don't want water to get trapped behind it. When it does, it's going to get hot, it's going to steam. Steam builds pressure, and that delaminates, and we get blisters. It's pretty simple stuff to follow. I thought you had a question. And by the way, I am the type of instructor that loves heckling. I love y'all to ask questions. I love y'all to interrupt. Interrupting me is not rude. It's fun time for me.
Just don't forget the microphone.
Yep, please go to the microphone. There's microphones on each row, and then there's 2 in the back of the room. And if you're online, Hollis will recognize you and speak up for you. So here we are moving back to the masonry stucco finally. I think I got my pictures a little bit out of line there. But masonry adhered masonry veneers are installed basically the same way the masonry stucco is. The masonry stucco onto a framed structure. Again, you can see the layout here in this picture. That's just a great illustration there. But that will come out, like I said, to the OSB or to the sheathing, to the vapor barrier, to the hardware cloth, to the scratch coat, brown coat, finish coat, and then paint it. Because again, it's a good skin. Let's keep water where it belongs, and that's not in our house. 45 or 50% relative humidity grows most of the molds that cause asthma and things of that nature. So that's pretty amazing stuff. Stone cladding, I love it. And the faux stone, the manufactured stone that's out there now is getting so good that I have to touch it and sometimes even find a little spot I can scrape a little bit to see if it's Mother Nature stone or the artificial stuff. The artificial stuff, the advantage to it is it has a good long life, but it's really, really light. And most natural stone is really, really heavy. And then we're adding more and more load to our houses. A brick veneer, which I'm sure we'll get into, needs to have a foundation just like your house. But the stone veneers don't necessarily have to unless it's true structural stone, and then it needs to have the foundation. It is the foundation.
So we got a question from the remote audience about paint. What's the best paint?
The best paint is probably about 30-year paint. If you want to know manufacturers, I drive a Ford, nobody really cares about that unless you happen to like a Ford or you really hate a Ford. But you want to use a good high-end acrylic. So I spend about $30 to $50 a gallon per paint for my exterior because I want to protect my house. Houses when I was younger at my age did not cost $500,000 for a starter home. That's just getting ridiculous. $400,000 for a starter home. I paid, I think, $80 to build my first house, and that was a big house. So quality, look it up. Back in the day, I'm really going to offend some of y'all. I think lead-based paint is some of the best paint ever put out on the market. That lead, where it can cause brain damage, yes, it can. Please don't eat your house, okay? But where it can cause brain damage to us, it does the same thing to the organism or the microorganisms of fungi. So those houses didn't rot because it gave the fungi the same brain damage it can us. So I like the lead-based paint. That stuff was developed in the just past the mid-1700s. Lead is the final waste product of uranium decay. So it's uranium poop. It's the final waste product of uranium decay. And that's why it's so lethal. But man, what a great product it was. I hope that answered your question for the paint. Wasn't a very good answer, but I think in building materials and things, in building tools and tools for us, the cheapest is not always the best. You expect to spend some money for some quality stuff.
Yeah, lead didn't work. That was a great product for shower pans.
Correct. It's soft, it's malleable. The Greek word for lead is plumbum. That's where we got plumbing from, right? Because it was the most malleable metal that we could make for running water that wasn't expensive like silver and gold. So it was convenient to use, but a great product. But yeah, shower pans, those good 60s and 70s shower pans. I literally, when I test a shower pan, I put water in it and fill it up about an inch and wait a few minutes and go downstairs and look up, or go in the crawl space and look up, because I've been burned too many times. And a regular shower pan is about $3,500 now. So that's just more money than I want to risk. It's a good customer care for our people as well. So back to stucco, expansion joints. If it's synthetic, like this, the reason I think that's synthetic is it's about 3/4 of an inch wide, and it tapers in to a point, the expansion joint does. So that's telling me that it's synthetic. It has more space to be able to move. If it were masonry, it'd be about 3/8 of an inch thick joint, and it'd be very defined. It would go in, actually a piece of metal trim is usually if there's expansions. And that's because concrete cracks. I mean, who has ever seen a concrete slab that didn't have any cracks in it? It's not possible, right? So it's going to crack, and so is masonry stucco. That's another good reason to have the paint on there, is to bond those cracks and not let them be visible. Again, that's mostly for aesthetics, not being visible, but who wants to buy an ugly house? You can't hardly sell an ugly house, right? So the expansion joist for the stucco is here. The you can see it right above the windows. That's most likely masonry. Now, that's me standing on the street. That's my interpretation standing on the street. As I get up to the cladding, I'm going to touch it, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to try to find a spot where I can look up under it. Don't you love the selfie mode on your smartphone? I used to have to get a mirror and hold it just right. Now I can just get my phone and put it up there on selfie and look up under. Man, it works great. But the joints tell me a lot of what kind of siding that's going to be. More illustrations of the eaves. There's a picture that I'm hoping is in here. I'm pretty sure it is, that I really enjoy, and I'll talk more about that when we get there. Eaves did have the lawsuit, but what happens, and I mentioned that Drive It might still have some money left, I'm not sure, but what happens is Bubba, the contractor, goes to the supply store, and today, the 14th of October here, they're having a sale, and that sale is the Drive It fiberglass mesh, which is light blue in color, by the way, is on sale. And the Stowe base coat is on sale, and the fine stone finish coat and the Firestone polystyrene, styrofoam, they're all on sale. So I'm going to buy each one that's on sale and make a mud system. Now the manufacturer says you have to start with their manufactured close-cell polystyrene and work all the way out using only their stuff. So the only way to tell if you have a mud system is to chemically test each layer, and because each layer has their own tells chemically, and that's it. So if you're trying to sue Drive It for a faulty system because you have the light blue fiberglass mesh, and by the way, I think Stowe is white, Finestone is red, not Firestone, Finestone, and then I can't remember who yellow is. But each one had different colors for their stuff. But that's for their fiberglass mesh. But that still didn't mean that it was a pure system. The perfect storm happened in '95. That's when all of these troubles started. In Williamsburg is where the media got a hold of the synthetic stucco fail, North Carolina there. And that's because the contractor decided to put a membrane on the inside of the stud wall and the water resistant barrier on the outside for the stucco. And all of a sudden they created a steam pot inside the framing. And all that humidity would, somewhere between here and outside is the dew point. Well, the dew point's outside because it's raining right now. But somewhere inside that wall usually is the dew point for humidity to condense. With this synthetic stucco, it got pretty drastic when it did that condensing. I had to do a inspection on I did the new construction part. It was $1 million house in downtown, in the Ritchie area of downtown Atlanta. They added $2 million wings off of this house. And the architect wanted Mylar to be the vapor barrier on the outside and on the inside. And it's one of the top biggest residential architecture grades in Atlanta. They had to rebuild all three of the structures. So it ended up being about a $4 million tear down and rebuild. They're a big company. They had the money. They could do it. They had the insurance. They made it right. But believe me, that architect got fired. And his name was toast around Atlanta for a long time because he was determined that he was going to have that Mylar on both sides. So water leaks in at the windows where that great Dow 795 caulk is, and it leaks in and it gets trapped back there, and then it steams, and then it gets sunlight on it, and the fungi just, man, that was an all-you-can-eat buffet. They were just having a great time consuming that house. This is the picture I talked about. This is one of my favorite pictures. I pulled this off Sergei Larenkov. He takes World War II pictures and then superimposed these. This was in the 80s. Look at the folks' clothing on the outside of that picture. Well, that was in Europe. I'm not sure. I think this was in Russia, and I think those were Russian officers. But think of World War II. We tore the heck out of that continent fighting World War II. Just tore the heck out of all of Europe and England, right? And Japan. But instead of going through and rebuilding all of those gorgeous buildings and doing all that super work to make those buildings pretty again, I mean, look at the trash, the devastation in the center of that picture. Instead of doing that, they developed this great new product called exterior insulating finishing systems, EIFS. That's where synthetic stucco came from, was World War II. And basically, we just gave Europe a facelift with the synthetic stucco. Now, it wasn't necessarily the closed-cell polystyrene or something of that nature behind it. It was just to give it a good, smooth coating that would withstand weatherization and would withstand some damage. So it's, if you go up and you feel the areas on the outside of that picture, it feels like regular masonry. So I've been told. I've not gone and touched it, but I'm going to be that weird tourist when I do go to Europe, that I'm going to be walking up and touching all these buildings to see how it feels, just because of this picture mostly. I hope y'all enjoy that picture as much as I do, because that is just, I wait for this picture to come up. Brick veneer is an incredible product. It's probably going to stop a 30-06 round. Okay, so it's good and strong, and it's going to stop some serious stuff. I hope we're not having to. I hope our criteria is not to stop a 30-06 round, but it's durable enough that it can do that. But it's just a skin, right? If we're looking at brick masonry, we're probably looking at a structure built in the 40s or earlier. We still see some, especially if you go coastal and someone wants a brick house, you'll see brick. But about every 6 courses going up going up here, about every 6 course, they're going to take the normal brick, the normal laid bed head brick, and they're going to turn it perpendicular and turn it into a spreader instead of a stretcher, turn it into a spreader to join 2 brick veneers, and that becomes a structural element. So if we don't see every 6 courses, and how structures that I looked at, a church in Atlanta was built, finished in 1903, every 6 courses. Houses from the 1800s and from the 30s, all every 6 courses. So that seems to be, I don't know if it was ever written down, that seems to be the standard in masons. But this is a veneer we're looking at. Check out the brick ties, those little metal straps right there. Every so often, they bend that brick tie out and put it between a course of brick to keep that brick from moving too much. Those brick ties are made out of galvanized steel. Yes, Jim?
We had some builders in this area that they cut bricks in half, right, to look like a
stretcher,
and put them on wood framed houses. And if you can't get down, if they've totally finished the basement, you can't see the ends of the joists, you're not going to know what you're dealing with. They look like solid masonry, but the joists are sitting on sill plates. They're not in masonry pockets.
That's amazing. Isn't it amazing what we humans will do for a buck sometimes? I think I love seeing the spreader courses. I think it's very attractive in an older building. The Elliott condos in downtown Atlanta, not too far from the Varsity Restaurant, Centennial Park. I think it was completed in the late 1800s, and the veneer, the masonry brick structure on that one, the people, I did a reserve study on that building, a 30-year maintenance finance plan for them. And the people were just astounded at how much in love I was in with their brick masonry. It was a triple layer of brick. I've never seen that before. So on the outside, every 6 courses, but that same every 6 courses on the inside layer was set at halfway on that one. So they staggered the three walls. It was awesome. I spent way too much time inspecting that. Again, I love the interesting stuff. But as I was talking about on those brick ties, that's galvanized steel. Galvanized steel in our construction, good for about 20 years. That's a short time, right? When we see rust on galvanized, it's pretty well toast on the inside. If we see it from the outside, it's pretty well gone on the inside. So we have these, the wall ties in between the mortar joints here. Now, brick for its own right is pretty waterproof, right? Take a clay pot outside, well, pretty much. I mean, if you take a clay flower pot and you stick your thumb in that hole, big clay pot, and you fill it with water, you're going to have to move before the water leaks out of there, pretty much. So brick for its own right is pretty much going to stop that water, but the mortar joints are not. Water's going to pass pretty easily through that. Yeah, you're right. Nothing's really truly waterproof. Jim was pointing out that brick does leak. Yeah, it does go through the baked clay, but a lot slower. So water moves pretty easily in there. And then it needs to be able to get out the weep holes, right? That's something that we can get in trouble with out in the field. We want to make sure that there's good egress for that water that gets trapped in that gap between the brick veneer and the house. So again, moving back to this picture, if you were able to look down behind the brick, there should be an inch gap between the veneer and the house, the skin and the structural house. And that's for whatever water that does pass through there to be able to transpose down. Hopefully you don't have mud bridges to let water toward the house very easily. So there's keep hitting the wrong button. There's the stretcher course. That's the perpendicular brick that joined two veneers. And then on this picture, we don't see any part of the, oh, I do see stretcher courses. So that's structural. Look at that right in the center there. And then if you go 6 more, there it is. Yeah, so that's a structural wall as well. Easy to see, unless people pull tricks like Jim was talking about. Yeah, polybutylene, y'all remember when that was going crazy for us? Builders around where I am got smart, so they would put copper coming out of the wall and have all the poly inside the walls where you couldn't see it, and say it was a copper house. People. So the brick veneer is heavy, right? You get you 5 or 10 bricks, and at my age, I started grunting a little bit carrying that. Back when I was a kid, that was nothing. But now it is. So that brick, being heavy, needs to sit on the same foundation that the house does, or an approved variant of that foundation. So the foundation needs to go at least 4 inches extra out and have a ledge for that brick to sit. And preferably that brick ledge is a few inches, they prefer 4 inches below the slab height again. Again, we're trying to keep water from getting in the house, trying to keep built up water from going through the mortar joints and getting inside the house. When I do new construction, pre-drywall and the brick veneer is not on, I have a probe that I bought at one of the IWs. It's a stainless steel wire, but it's I think it's like a number 2 or number 1 wire, and you can roll it up. It takes a while to unroll it, but man, it pushes into the ground as a probe very easily. It's a 4-foot probe. The guy's name that used to sell those was Johnson. He was from Canada. I can't remember his first name. We share the same last name is the only reason I remember that. But I love that device. You can see the gap between the veneer and the wall in here and in here. So that, again, is to allow water to transfer. Weep holes, weep screeds, we need to have a way for that water to get out. I think I'm taking a long time, so I'm going to move on pretty good here for a second. Mortar joints, again, have about 30. Yeah, I need to get moving. So we talked about the water going through the mortar joints. A concave or a curved is the best to deflect water. The V-cut is the next best. The extruded, where you just push the brick down on the mortar bed and it squirts out, that's one of the worst. And so is when we scrape out the entire inside of the brick joints. Try to give it some uniformity. That holds water as well. What happens when water gets behind the brick is in freezing weather, that water will expand and start popping off chunks of the brick for spalling, or deteriorate the brick, or deteriorate the mortar all the way out. I've done one house where that bottom picture there, you can see the brick kind of delaminating, it almost looks like. I literally felt some flakes landing on me as I was walking around the outside of the house, and had a great conversation with my client at that time. A good masonry house, the stone houses, God, isn't that just beautiful work? Wouldn't you love to have that mountain house? I wish that it wasn't foggy behind. I'd love to see what that looks like. Driving here, playing around the Cascades and the Blue Ridge Mountains, oh man, that was just beautiful driving through there. Got on one point before I came down into Roanoke, and the leaves were about peak up there. It was gorgeous. Look at how thick that is. Pretty amazing stuff. Where we get into trouble with the stone buildup veneer, a lot of the stone foundations from the 50s and older in Atlanta is part of Stone Mountain. They just, that Stone Mountain was a quarry at one time, so one side of the mountain's been pretty well beat up.
About 4 or 5 slides ago, you had a comment on deteriorating mortar, and we've been having a discussion among my peers about mortar as it reaches 100 years old.
If you wouldn't mind speaking in there, I'll rehash that. So the question or the comment is about older mortar starting to erode. Because again, as water passes through stuff, have you ever been in a cave and seen stalactites and stalagmites? Or been at a house and seen white chalky stuff on the houses? All that is the water moving through the mortar and eroding it, just like in a cave. And it's easy to see as that gets more and more sandy. In Vinings, an area near where I live, they love to put English ivy on the outside of the masonry houses. I made a fortune at one time in my career when I was building, having my masons go in and redo the masonry, because you take those vines off and there's nothing but sand left in the mortar joints, because the shrubs or the vines, the ivy, is taking all of those all the calcium for its livelihood, for its food, its consumption, and boom, you got nothing but sand. But that's a great point. Insel brick. Have you all had much of that up here? That was if you ever watched the movie Cars with Tow Mater in there saying about as happy as a tornado in a trailer park, that was about one step up from a mobile home park in rural Georgia. And what it is 3 foot by 5 foot shingles, basically, that are about a 1/2 inch thick. Imagine the weight of that. But a lot of the material of this, and it was made to look like brick. That doesn't look like brick, does it? But it was made to simulate that for lower cost on a cladding. And basically it started having problems day 2. Day 1, it was like, oh, this is really cool. Day 2, it was like, oh, that's really not as cool. But I still get to see it about once a year. The question is, does it have asbestos? And the answer is most likely. Asbestos is a natural mineral in the soil. If you're walking along a creek and you see the white shiny mica flat stone, chances are there's asbestos in the dirt right near it. It's a fiber. And where I live, you can't mill it, or you can't mine it, because there's just not enough of the asbestos mineral in the soil. But you go up to Niagara Falls and you can just shovel it and fill it the back of your pickup and never hit any other soil. It's that prevalent up there, and it's just a wonderful product. Don't snort it. Getting into the cement fibers, the Hardy plank, that's a name brand, right? Again, like Kleenex. But the cement fibers One of my favorite things to tell my clients when their house has like maybe brick or stone and then hardy plank around the sides or cement fiber around the sides is that has the same fire rating as brick. So they might get a discount from their insurance company. I don't know the policies of their insurance companies, but I've just told them a good thing about the house because doggone it, I've just spent the last 2 hours talking about all the bad things about the house, right? Because that's what we do. We find the problems in a house. And then all of a sudden I tell them something good. Anytime I can tell them something good, I like to do that too. Just makes them feel a little bit warmer, not like running for the hills at the end of the inspection. I've never killed a deal, but I've had a few commit suicide during the inspection. Asbestos siding, great product. Had it on a beach house that my great aunt and uncle bought in the 20s, and it's still on Panama City Beach. It still has the only undeveloped acre of Panama City Beach. We don't own it anymore, but it has this siding, and in the crawl space of that house is 9 pallets of asbestos siding. So every time one breaks, a family member that won't be named because it's illegal to do will take off the broken piece and put a new piece on. Hardy Plank has come out with a siding that looks just like it. So there is a cement fiber answer to fiber cement asbestos. Don't snort it. Logs, y'all have a lot more real log homes up here than I could ever hope to see in Atlanta. I would love to sit in some of your classes that specializes on them. I've sat in a couple that Bronson's taught and just remarkable stuff. What you see where I am is this. Yeah, siding, log siding. It looks pretty until you get to the corners, because at the corner of a log house, you have beams or logs sticking out, kind of staggered all the way up. You could climb it. Not so on the siding homes. But it's the same thing. Keep what's outside out, what's inside in, and we're going to do a whole lot better. We're going to be pretty good there. CMU, concrete masonry units. I love acronyms, don't y'all, and abbreviations and stuff. NHIE, National Home Inspectors Exam, ASHI, American Society of Home Inspectors, NOVA, Northern Virginia, ASHI. I love using all those because I don't have to talk as much. But CMUs, that's a fine siding. It's a very durable, very reliable, maybe not very pretty. It can be, depending on what forms or molds they put it in. But it's probably not very pretty, but it's a fine siding. Getting back into some of the abbreviations, the stretchers, we've talked about a lot of these. Different types, different faces. You can get into the corner units. You can get into the slab ones that are actually an 8-inch block that has the inner core cut out for 4 inches. So you can have a 4-inch slab inside that. Yeah, I don't know where that keeps coming from. I'm sorry, guys, for the squeaks. Different looks of the blocks. They can have a different face. Again, we're looking at aesthetics there. So we can make concrete blocks look attractive. And we can make them bigger or smaller, however we want to go. Make them look like brick. This is real stone going on here. And I'm into just kind of some of the pictures that's going on. Look at the ivy or the vines growing on those walls. Every place. So that vine didn't just lay up against the wall and say, yeehaw, this is where I'm going to live. That vine has little feeders that penetrate into the mortar or into the cladding itself. And those little feeders give a fissure. And then rainwater gets in there, or melted snow or ice, and it expands, and you start getting that spalling effect again. Or, like I said, the feeders suck all of the nutrients and minerals out. How are we doing on time, Hollis? I'll keep on going. The good thing about brick is it's fireproof. I mean, it's going to take a lot for that to really, I mean, we're talking, when Notre Dame burnt a couple of years ago, that kind of heat for the brick or block to be damaged, that was some extreme heat in that beautiful church structure. But a typical house fire like this or an apartment fire, tragic, but the veneer in the outside, especially if it's a true masonry, or true structural brick, it's probably going to be just fine and you can rebuild inside of it. This is a practice building for fire and rescue, for them to go up and down walls, and they'll have smoke coming out of it and pretty impressive stuff. But look at the condition of that cladding, that skin. I might as well just be taking a wire brush and scratching it down my arm as far as that paint's going to do for that wood behind there. I think that's gorgeous. I'm a very lineal person. I love straight, clean cut lines. I bet you that is a bear to keep dry inside. But that is just so gorgeous to me. I love Frank Lloyd Wright houses. I imagine y'all are almost, well, no, I guess you are still a good ways away from Chicago, but we had a apprentice of his in Atlanta, and he built 24 houses. I've been able to inspect 11 of them. His name is Robert Green. I love Frank Lloyd Wright construction. Keep it clean, keep the skin in good shape. Again, if we protect our possessions and maintain them and keep them up, they're going to stay with us. They're going to keep up for a long time. If we let the outside rot, well, the inside's going to rot too. If I let my skin be in bad shape, my inside's not going to be in good shape. Okay, it's the same with the house. Painting is so important. Yes, it costs money, but grow up. We own a house. We got to keep it painted. I own a truck. I got to keep tires on it. And I got to keep gas in it. And I got to change the oil. If not, I'm going to be, hopefully not tomorrow, driving 10 hours back to Atlanta, but I'll be sitting on the side of the road if I don't take good care of that 12-year-old truck sitting out there. People have incredible taste. There's a house near me that the architect, builder of the house, made his office, and it's probably across, it's octagonal, but probably across is 22 feet. He's got his drafting tables and, real drafting tables, not the CAD stuff. He's got his CAD stuff up there too, but it's like a witch's turret. It's glass all the way around. It's probably 1970s contemporary look down below, but it's got this weird octagon sticking out of the top of it. Stays dry. He maintains the heck out of it, spends a fortune on it. John Hart, a great guy, he's a private architect. It's been probably a decade since I've stopped by and knocked on his door. But when we start seeing weird things, cracks, especially if they have different depths, if it's wider at top or wider at bottom and than it is at the other end, it's showing movement. Or just, what are you thinking? Letting that tree grow right up against the house. It's beautiful, right? And when we build a house, we want our new house to look pretty. So we put the shrubs right up against the foundation, the brand new shrubs that we just got from the nursery, right? Put them right up against the house because that looks better. And then 10 years later, they're hurting the house. They're hurting the foundation. They're putting too much humidity up against the house. Look at this tree right into the brick. That probably started out as an acorn. That's in Fairmount, Georgia, little boondock area, and it's lifting the foundation because probably as late as the 50s, we didn't use footings in Georgia. Georgia red clay is what we call it, but our soil is some of the best dirt to build on. It's very compactable, very durable, very resilient. And so, you go from 40s, 50s, all the way back to, the penal colonies of Georgia, and there were no footings under those houses. Again, well, Stone Mountain is right under the earth, wherever we are down there, so we've got a good granite bedrock. Interesting. I think the story on this one is it was actually two containers, the materials containers like on cargo ships or on trains that they welded together and then put a cladding on. Box, but I bet you that thing will withstand a tornado. Same thing with this. That's 3 cargo containers put together and then put a cladding on it. Beautiful look. I'd love to have that up in the mountains. That'd just be something fun to be able to say I own. How are we doing on time? 15, okay. Here, this is from Wayfair. This is a kit you can buy. Each one of those leaves is copper. Can you imagine how much that costs? Can you imagine that if that was in the city right here, that would not be there tomorrow morning? That'd be in somebody's pipe right there. Just say no to crack. Very basic. I'm sorry, what was your name again? Dorian. Is building a shed right now. Showed me some of the pictures, and that's very much what this looks like with a skylight in it. But probably just as basic as it can be. The first house I built for myself as a young bachelor was 1,800 square foot. Cost me $35,000 cash to build the house, and I built it around myself. I got it dried in and moved in. Before electricity and water was even in there, because I didn't care. I was a kid. I was out in the boondocks. There were no code guys around. And so I lived in it with kerosene lanterns for the first probably 6 months. But I mean, a very simple structure is very easy to build. Now mine had shingled roofing. I'm not too sure about the roofing on this picture. Do y'all have any questions as I'm going along here? Again, I'd love to be interrupted. Yes, sir. And
I don't think you really addressed wood siding as much, or did I miss that? I might have been moving around. But a little story on mine, Reston nearby here has a lot of modern style architecture with cedar siding. And the interesting thing with the cedar, I did one house, it was a fairly expensive house, about $1.5 million. And they had beautifully solid stained siding, cedar siding. And the client said, oh, I'm going to take that off. I'm putting on fiber cement. I'm putting on hardy plank. And it just reminded me of the effectiveness of advertising and marketing, because what was there was wonderful. And here they feel like, oh, hardy plank is much better than this. So just a thought.
so I turned my speaker off for a second. I agree. And kind of touched on wood. The main thing is keep it sealed. You mentioned the solid stain on the cedar siding. My houses, I'm in my 8th house. I built 5 of my own houses. The only house that was not cedar siding, was in 2000. I got hired, and I usually don't do inspections on Saturdays. And I got talked into doing an inspection on a Saturday for this good realtor of mine, for a young lady who traveled all the time and needed a Saturday inspection. And the short story is 23 years later, that young lady and I have 2 children that are both in college. I married my client. It was a really good house. I mean, but that's the only house that I have owned that, and I still had my house from that time that has not been cedar, and that house was masonite. And man, I learned my lesson. It was a 1997 masonite house, and you start fixing boards that get the water damage in it, and you're going to be there a while, kind of like trying to replace one shingle in a 20-year-old composite shingle roof. That one shingle turns into, a full 10 by 10 square, right? But yeah, the wood siding is beautiful. I love wood siding. When people move from cedar or wood siding or a man-made siding to the cement fiber stuff, they can usually get a little bit of break on their insurance, like I mentioned. But can't you tell the difference between Simplank and hardy plank when you pull up to a house? You can just see the aspect that it gives, because we see so much of it. There's no uniqueness. My cedar house, I have a channel rustic, so they're vertical boards, 10-inch pieces with a 2-inch kind of half-inch setback. So they're 3/4 inch boards. That's nice, but they're vertical. And I just absolutely love the look of it. The problem with it is carpenter bees love the taste of it. And then the carpenter bees get in there and the woodpeckers hear them and they're like, ooh, buffet time. Let's all you can eat. We can really tear into this. Or warblers, birds. Do we have any bird people here? Warblers, the little songbird, the joker's about the size, smaller than a baseball. And that thing puts a hole 2.5 inches in your siding to make his nest. Or when you see that in stucco, synthetic stucco chimneys. Did you?
It's worth having a look at Hardy's website and look at their architectural collection. They started it about 7 years ago, I think. It's come a long, long way since then. And we're seeing it. I'm seeing it in new construction all through Northern Virginia right now. It doesn't look anything like Hardy plank, but it is. You've just got to know what you're looking at, and it's worth going and looking at the website to find that out.
Yeah, you can get the scalloping going on. You can get what looks like cedar shingles. You can get what looks like.
Oh, no. These are big rectangular geometric panels with big joints in them, and it's remarkable stuff. It's good.
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Any other questions? Okay, I'll keep rolling along because the next picture is kind of a fun one. This is what happens when an architect has time off. Something like that, yeah. There's a guy who built a house up in Pickens County, Georgia. They got municipal inspectors 5 years ago. That was always fun to go in there. But the architect, wanted to be ambiguous. So his house looks like a water tower. It has an elevator that takes you up to the tower. It's massive in there. He's one of the namesakes for Caruso architecture in Atlanta. But, just really, really cool stuff. And you can have fun with houses, right? Here's some of that scalloping that I was talking about. I believe this was wood, but it's a bit busy, but then it's also downright pretty. Could you imagine setting those, installing those individual shingles? That's a lot of work. Can't talk about claddings without the cladding being dirt. Talk about an insulator. Y'all have basements here, right? So that basement, the basement of my house doesn't, and when it's 100 degrees outside, it's maybe 75, 76 in my basement because of the dirt, and the dirt keeping it that temperature. My wife is like, why do you like going into the basement? And that's where my pool table is, that's where my man cave is, and that's where my office is, because it's comfortable. I don't have to change the air conditioner. I do have to run a dehumidifier. Any basement needs to have that dehumidifier, but I love having that dirt around me. I feel a little more secure. Again, I'm a veteran, so 30 years ago I was in Somalia. Doggone, that's a long time for things to play with your mind. So I kind of like being secluded and safe like that. I do get to where life is a little people-y for me sometimes. Have you ever heard about a gabion? Not papillon, but gabions. Gabions are metal wired baskets filled with rock. Great retaining walls, especially in an area that you wanted to naturalize and to grow over. But this person made his walls out of gabion, out of baskets of rock. Probably have insect problems on the inside, I would guess, because nothing is masoned together, nothing is sealed together, but that's probably going to stop a RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, not a 22. Yes, sir.
It's on.
What's the lifetime on that wire to hold back the rock?
Well, if it's steel, probably about 20 years. But the idea is that you let vines and nature overgrow it, and then it's held together by nature, not by anything else. So in big subdivisions, big developments in Georgia, I'll find gabion retaining walls. They're always fun because they're about 4 foot, so I can get on my knees now. When I was your age, I could jump down them, but they offset about 8 inches to a foot, going up the build, from low coming up. So I can jump down them and climb up them, nowhere near as gracefully now as I used to could, but I've never had one cave, and I've found where the steel's pretty well rusted, but it's still doing its job. It's kind of a naturalized answer to construction, to a retaining wall. Yeah. Pre-07, when we had sodium arsenate in our pressure-treated lumber, ground contact rated pressure-treated lumber, I felt really confident for 20, 30, 40 years out of it. In 07, when we went to the borate and the chemicals that are not necessarily arsenic, again, what rots wood is the microorganisms eating the wood, the wood-destroying organisms, right? So now this stuff, I'm seeing deck posts going into the ground that are starting to rot at about 7 years. So yeah, stuff built 2018, I'm starting to see rot in, where it's in contact with the ground. We should be pretty close there, Mr. Brown. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Then let's keep having fun. How about sheet metal? Little, almost a geodesic dome type look. I mean, but that's a siding, right? It's a skin. And as long as we're keeping what's outside out and what's inside in, that skin's going to work just fine. It's kind of like insulation. Everything has an R value. It's just how much do you need to put to get the R value you need for a wall or a ceiling or a floor. Every substance could be a cladding. Whether, I mean, paper, probably not a very good one, but how about, I toured Mexico in my high school football team and went to this place called Las Coquinas. It's where the Priquitine volcano kind of washed over an old Spanish mission, and only thing sticking out is the bell house out of the lava flow. But the richest man in that village, the mayor, his house was the tall pole cacti, barrel cacti or whatever they are. It was cacti. There was about 5 houses that the exterior cladding was beer cans. They gave them a skin for them to live in. It was a efficiency. There was only one room in there. This whole town had no interior plumbing. Everything was outside. Showers, everything. But it was really, really my favorite place of all of Mexico. I spent 6 months in Mexico that year, and that was my favorite place. Just the people were all from there. Again, getting into those vines, I think that's beautiful. That kind of gives me the, I don't know, Poe, maybe even as early as Hemingway type feel of maybe the old Georgetown looks in DC. Stuff like that, where it's supposed to have that ivy on it to give it that grandeur, give it the, man, that is just tearing up the skin of that house. That's like laying out on the sand with baby oil on us. It's just going to tear up the skin of that house. Yeah, I was that teenager that did that, by the way. How about just steel? Keep it from rusting, and it's going to last a great long time. A little bit of zinc lock or zinc coating to give it that galvanization would be helpful, I think. But straight steel, they treat this one supposedly with motor oil, used motor oil. Just spray it on the house every once in a while. What is that doing to the environment? But the house isn't rusting. Beer cans. So that house I was talking about in Mexico was literally beer cans stacked on each other, somehow adhered or fastened to the house. This is masonry beer can. But it's cladding, right? It's a skin. Maintain that skin, maintain the structure there, and we're going to hold up. Most important thing I've said all day, and I've said it a dozen times, keep what's outside out and what's inside in, and we're going to be fine. When we're out in the field looking at these homes, keeping that in mind will protect our clients. And that's all we do is protect our clients. We give them the information to make a knowledgeable, good decision. And if we do that, we are absolutely worth our wages. And I sincerely hope that y'all are doing well up here and that Virginia market increases greatly. Here, tracking everything around the nation right now, Texas, parts of Texas are doing well. Missouri is almost back to 100%. And Jersey, New York are looking good. Ohio's looking good. Iowa is starting to come back. Where I'm in Georgia is about where y'all were a year ago. It's painful. So I hope y'all do real well. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attentiveness. For the folks online, thank you so much for watching us and joining us online today. Thank y'all.